Hello everyone, my name is Antonio Reynoso and I'm the current council member of the 34th District, which represents Williamsburg and Bushwick and Brooklyn and Ridgewood and Queens. I want to thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to meet a new base of folks, especially in the political realm, under the current circumstances that we have in our federal government. So thank you for your activity and your civic, I won't call it upheaval, but just being a part of it. Antonio Reynoso, I was born and raised in the south side of Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and I currently live a block away from where I grew up, so I'm still in Brooklyn. I grew up with poor immigrant parents from the Dominican Republic. They both came here to, of course, the American dream, not for themselves, but for their children. Cared deeply about education. My mother was actually a provider of health services for the elderly, and my father was a cook in a restaurant, a line cook in a restaurant. They both did both jobs for their entire life, my mother's currently an $11.99 member who only makes about $9.40 an hour after about 20 years of work. It just speaks to the inequities that we have in women's work mostly. I want to talk about that eventually, but also about how hard it is to raise a family in Williamsburg now with the same circumstances. Both my parents cared deeply about education and made sure that was the only thing I did while I was growing up, so I worked very little. But my upbringing really speaks to why I care deeply about the work that I do and why I want to continue that work. Being poor, being on food stamps, welfare, Section 8, and all these other government, what some people call handouts or safety nets, was extremely important. It gave me a chance to level the playing field. It really speak about equity versus equality. That's what we were able to take advantage of. And in doing so, the three of us, me and my two sisters, were able to graduate from college and be here in front of you today. I got lucky and got a scholarship to go to high school in a private school and didn't know about the concerns or the ills and the problems that we have in our public high schools until after I started working for Councilmember Diana Reyna shortly after college. While I was running, the most important thing that I was pressing was that in education, I wanted my luck to be the standard. Things that I took for granted and didn't even know were privileged to have in my private school are things that absolutely never existed in the public school system. So education was the first thing that I wanted to address. I was able to actually pass a law regarding guidance counselors in City Hall. Currently, we have no information from the Department of Education how many guidance counselors are in each building in a school and what exactly they do, whether it's behavioral work, whether it's discipline, whether it's college readiness, just doesn't exist. They're just called guidance counselors, GC, and nothing else down the road. My legislation actually made it so they have to document exactly what type of work these folks are doing so that we can start paying attention to whether or not they're working, whether or not we need more resources, and if there are any inequities in the system. On top of that, I'm also pushing another piece of legislation related to criminal justice. I want to call it more like police reform because we've done some criminal justice work that I don't think has gone far enough. The Right to Know Act has two portions to it, or two sections. One of it, of course, is the ID bill, which would make it so police officers have to present an identification card in every instance where they're dealing with a civilian. In doing so, we hope that an officer would behave appropriately and constitutionally in every interaction they have with a civilian, because afterwards, they know that they're going to have to give the card up with all their information and CCRB in the back. I also have a second piece of legislation that I'm pushing called the consensus search bill. Currently, everyone knows there's a constitutional right to deny a search where there is no probable or reasonable suspicion. Probable cause or reasonable suspicion. Unfortunately, when you go into your pockets to take out anything that's in it when an officer asks you to do it, you are voluntarily consenting as soon as you put your hands in your pockets. What we want to do is make it very clear that you educate people on what the right is, and then you let them know whether they understand it, and after they say they do understand it, then you actually ask permission on whether or not you can proceed with the search. It's like a Miranda rights for consent searches. That's what we're trying to get past right now. It's very difficult, but it's there are things that I care about. So when it comes to education, when it comes to criminal justice, housing, and transportation, all things that I think are very important. I have a track record, so I would love for you to do as much research on me as possible and then hold me accountable to it. And I want to represent the 34th District for the next 4 years and continue the progressive work that I've already done in the council. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off with a question, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to membership.
Thank you.
I am actually one of your constituents,
Nice.
so I'm asking for the club, but also for myself. What legislations do you intend to prioritize in your next term? I feel like we've kind of heard what you tried to prioritize this term. But what going forward have you, not hit on yet that you would like to prioritize?
So I'm having a little trouble with waste equity is the first one that I really want to push. So I think my next 4 years are really going to be focused on the environment more than anything else. It's been a priority for me, but not the #1 priority. I was focused on mostly housing, education, and transportation. Now I want environmental work to actually be my top number. We currently have in Bushwick and Williamsburg 3 times the asthma rates that we have anywhere else in the city of New York. And it's actually not 3 times the asthma rates, it's 3 times the entrance regarding asthma to Woodhull Hospital, which is the local hospital. I don't know the statistics for Wyckoff necessarily. And that comes from the fact that we actually handle 40% of the city's trash and have too many trucks on the streets causing pollution. So I'm looking for waste equity. Currently, the city has 40,000 tons of trash that they handle on a daily, that they can handle on a daily basis in the city of New York. Of that, we have 20,000 tons of capacity. I want to bring that down to 10,000, really cut it in half. Remember, 50% of this capacity is unused, which is a huge issue for this district. What we want to do is cap it, not allow for any new trash to come in, and hopefully bring some justice or environmental justice to young people in this community so we can bring down the asthma rates. That's one bill that I'm trying to push. The Right to Know Act has not been pushed, so it's something that I got to continue to advocate for. We also have Stanford Tenant Safety, which are the Department of Buildings bills. Currently, we know that the new tactic that's being used by landlords to harass tenants is construction in their apartment while they're still living in it. The Department of Building doesn't necessarily, and the DA's office doesn't necessarily consider or prosecute landlords as criminals when they do criminal activity because they're landlords. But the thing here is, as soon as you sign a lease, you are an owner of that property under the lease temporarily. So should any destruction of your property happen, you have the right to proceed to a criminal charge or criminal court for charges to your landlord. That does not happen in the city of New York. There's been one arrest in this district since I've been here, which has been the Israel brothers I want to call them. They got arrested thanks to Ken Thompson and the great work that he did. It was the first time that happened. Now they're out scot-free after paying a certain amount of money and settlements to the tenants. And also, they still own their buildings. And that's the kind of work that we do here in the city of New York when it comes to landlords. They have the utmost rights, and we have none. And I want to change that. And the Stanford Tenant Safety Bills is going to make it so that we can do more teeth to the actual laws that support and protect tenants. So those are 3 bills that I'm going to be working on.
Awesome. Let's open it up. Does anyone have a question?
Yes.
I have a question. The question is now that being that we have Trump in office, the problem is I was born and raised in Brooklyn. From here, what can we do to help the illegal immigrants, or what are their rights? Mm-hmm. Because from what I hear is like ISIS in this area. Somebody might call me ISIS in that area. ICE was in Home Depot on Thursday. Mm-hmm. What could happen to these people? What are their rights? Are they going to get picked up and sent away? Mm-hmm. And what about their kids? So
undocumented residents of our community are important, especially in Bushwick and Williamsburg, where we have a large population of undocumented residents. There's 2 things that we got to be clear with. There's a part where we just can't control it. We can't stop ICE from being anywhere, to be perfectly honest, right? What we can do is limit the information that we give to ICE or give to the state and the federal government only to a certain degree. And what we can do is stop broken windows, right? Those are the 3 things that I think I really want to get to the public. ICE is going to be in Home Depot. If they want to be there, they can, right? We can't stop that. We can't lie to the public and say that things are not happening or that we're going to protect them because we are a sanctuary city. It's just not the right information to give out. It is absolutely a trying time for undocumented residents of our community, and there's very little we can do to protect them. There are things we can do to be proactive in trying to limit the threat of deportation to many of those residents. And a part of that is the broken windows concept. These low-level offenses that are supposed to lead to larger bits of crime, especially in a community like this where crime is actually going down and is being lowered on a constant basis, I think is false. Currently, de Blasio and the commissioner have bought into this policy that I think actually harasses the people that can't afford to go to jail and are eventually arrested for poverty and because of being poor. If we don't change that policy, then we're not a sanctuary city. And I don't consider us a sanctuary city at the moment, so long as broken windows exist. The next thing is that there are attempts by the city to limit the information that they're giving to the state department for police and to the federal department, but there are certain things that we legally are obligated to do that goes to the state and federal government that eventually puts these folks at risk. So I guess what we need to do is continue to be outlets and locations of a safe space, to continue to be, I guess, partners in making sure that we could protect the residents that mean so much to us in this community, but ultimately we are extremely limited to how we can protect the undocumented residents while Trump is in office. Get rid of him in 3 years is important, and or maybe something else happens and he leaves earlier, or we really do something about Congress and the Senate in the next year.
Does anyone else have a question for Councilmember Reynoso? If not, I do have some more.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna take this a little bit out of left field. So obviously, a constitutional convention is in the air in New York State.
I thought I was going to get away from this.
We'd like to know what your position currently is on that constitutional convention, and give us a little bit why.
There's two issues here, and I guess I want to play them out and understand my dilemma, and I hope your dilemma as well. One of them is the Constitutional Convention is a great opportunity for activists and reformers like us. It gives us an opportunity to finally dive into a state constitution that has many inequities in it, has very like racially and like class-based like significance to it on a negative level for people that look like me and that grew up like me. We also want to hold our state representatives accountable, which we all can't do currently because the political climate won't do it. And there are other things that we could really take on that'll change the way we do business in New York, which I do believe should be like the progressive bastion of the entire country. And we can get there if we modify the state constitution in a real way. The concern is the other side. The other side has more money than we do. We're just naturally, I guess, through struggle, we rise through power, through oppression, you rise and you get into a movement the way we do. But the charter schools are going to pour money into the system. The anti-union folks and big business are going to pour money into the system. The pensions are going to be at risk. We're going to put pensions at risk that people paid into and are relying on for retirement. So these two sides of it, where we get to finally change the way we do business in the state, specifically in the state with these assembly members and these state senators, or we put at risk pensions, education reform, and so forth. So for me, that's a tough fight to have. Now, I have confidence in the movement, but is this something we're willing to risk? Is the long-term sustainability of our education system and so forth, and pensions for ethics reform and so forth? I don't know. So I have not taken a position, but I'm leaning no. I don't want to take that risk. I do think that if we elect good people, we can make this happen through elections and through just basic legislation and charter change and charter reviews that they can do at the state level. Let's just get rid of these mediocre Democrats that just stand around and show up occasionally to events and don't have anything of significance to contribute. Get rid of them so that we can have real leadership in the Democratic Party and something like the IDC doesn't exist. And two, get rid of the IDC members. And we have some folks, some IDC members in Brooklyn. I just suggest we take into consideration how active we want to be during their elections. Those are two things that we can do that are not constitutional convention and still affect change. So thank you.